Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Monday, October 14th. I'm Elizabeth Arcalian. Coming up, much of the Sierra Nevada is protected by firefighters from the U.S. Forest Service. But over the last few years, the government has struggled to pay them.
They're already so underpaid. I mean, this has been an issue now for decades. And so even the modest pay increases that we've seen in recent years have barely filled the bucket.
Hear about the challenges wildland firefighters are facing in just a few minutes. But first, today's headlines. As the Big Fresno Fair comes to a close today, officials are disclosing that another racehorse died on Friday. That makes it the third horse death at the fairgrounds this year, and what officials say is a rare occurrence. According to news reports, the third horse that died was euthanized following an injury on the track. This year, the fairgrounds doubled the number of racing competitions. KVPR has obtained photos of dead cattle in Tulare County, which officials have confirmed died from bird flu. The cattle were laid on the side of a rural road, and the photos were reportedly taken last week. Meanwhile, the number of human bird flu cases in the Central Valley has now grown to 6 as of Friday. All who have been infected have had close contact with sick cattle. Officials say the strain of bird flu found in valley cows resembles a strain found in Idaho. Local dairy farmers say they suspect that cattle from Tulare County were moved between Idaho and the valley, and that may have led to infections. Californians will vote on 10 statewide ballot propositions this fall, and this week we're continuing to bring you what they all mean as you fill out your ballot. Proposition 34 would require some California health providers to use profits from prescription drug sales to directly fund patient care. CalMatters' Mary Franklin Harvin explains.
Federal law lets healthcare providers who serve low-income and at-risk patients buy prescription drugs at a discount and then sell them at retail rates. Providers are supposed to put the profits from those sales toward expanding patient services, but there's some leeway on that spending. Prop 34 would change that by requiring certain providers to spend at least 98% of that money directly on patient care. The proposition seems to target only one organization, the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, a group that spent tens of millions to influence state and local housing policies. Supporters say money generated from federal discounts should go to help patients and not be diverted to political pursuits. Opponents say this is a political hit job, paid for by the landlord lobby that sees the AIDS Healthcare Foundation as a threat.
That was CalMatters' Mary Franklin Harvin. Governor Gavin Newsom last week touted the success of a partnership between the California Highway Patrol and local law enforcement to curb crime in Kern County. The operation has resulted in more than 1,600 arrests with a focus on violent crime as well as organized retail and auto theft. The partnership between the CHP, Bakersfield Police Department, and Kern County Sheriff began earlier this year. A state committee on happiness has released its first official report, and as KVPR's Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado tells us, the committee encourages lawmakers to consider happiness more often.
No offense to you, don't waste your time. Here's why, because I'm happy. Clap along.
Perhaps we can all take a page from Pharrell Williams and just be happy. Legislators in California say it's easier said than done, but the benefits are worth it. Happier people live longer, are more organized, and solve more complex problems. The committee recommends looking at incomes and social connections as a starting place. Studies show higher incomes might boost happiness, but that low incomes certainly don't. Researchers have found, for the most part, happiness levels in California are pretty steady, but the number of people who are more unhappy has grown, while those who are very happy has gone down. So the state has some work to do. For KVPR News, I'm Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado.
Support for Central Valley Daily comes from Fresno Mazda, a member of the Prieto Automotive family, celebrating the grand opening of the newly renovated showroom on Thursday, October 24th. This all-ages event features live music, refreshments, and a gift for the first 100 guests. MyFresnoMazda.com.
And now to our main story. This year was another busy fire season across the Sierra Nevada, where firefighters put out blazes like the Burrell Fire. It burned nearly 60,000 acres and is the largest wildfire in Kern County history. Among those putting out the raging fire were firefighter crews from the U.S. Forest Service. But as they extinguished flames in the forests, fire crews have also been fighting for changes within the agency itself, for things like better pay and more accurate job descriptions. Right now, a rookie Forest Service firefighter makes roughly $15 an hour. Gabrielle Cannon is a reporter for the British publication The Guardian and is based in the Bay Area. She's been reporting on this issue and joined me for a conversation. Cannon says wildland firefighters, like those with the U.S. Forest Service, do very different jobs compared to what you'd see from a city firefighter.
In a wildland crew, you'll have folks who are hiking in to these really rugged, difficult terrain right at the fire line. They're going to be carrying, up to 70-pound packs, bringing in things like shovels and chainsaws and drip torches in order to fight these fires where they're starting and where they're spreading. But one of the things that we're seeing is as these fires spread into communities, or we're having more communities even based in wildland areas, folks who are typically trained as wildland firefighters, who may be more familiar with working with a landscape, are now having to actually become structure firefighters.
The union that represents these federal wildland firefighters sent what you called in your report a scathing letter to their leadership. That includes the U.S. Forest Service and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. What did that letter say?
Yeah, so this is where it's something that is so important, and it, starts to get complicated, right? So we think about the way that the federal government works is you have something called an occupational series. I mean, it's really straightforward, a set of guidelines. It outlines the expertise, the credentials, the duties that federal employees will need to perform in each level. And so the Forest Service, the USDA, these different agencies that employ firefighters have these occupational series to define these different jobs. But these things have not been updated, sometimes decades, but even some, go back to the mid-20th century. This is long before the fires that we're seeing now, these really big, really dangerous, fast-moving fires that require a high degree of skill. And so what the union has been pushing for is an updated version to those job descriptions or position descriptions. And this is connected to everything from the low pay issues to firefighters feeling like they can't progress and rise in the ranks. And it, of course, gets incredibly complicated because if you increase these positions across the board, obviously that's going to increase the budget. But ultimately, I think what's sort of happening here is it's adding insult to injury. Firefighters who have faced every type of hardship from, of course, the physical strain, the mental fatigue and strain, the mental health issues, being away from their families, the incredible risks that they're undertaking. They're doing far more than the position descriptions that they're assigned to. So there's been some movement on the issue through Congress has requested that these roles be updated. And so part of that process, these federal agencies have been looking at them closely and trying to ensure that this rewriting these position descriptions basically from scratch is going to reflect the duties that firefighters are performing.
I also read in your report there were concerns of wage theft as well as the sort of job misclassification issue. Can you just detail a little more what the impacts are that these firefighters are feeling?
Absolutely. And, these things go hand in hand. When someone is misclassified in their job, over the course of their career, they're going to be making considerably less money. For a wildland firefighter, they're already so underpaid. I mean, this has been an issue now for decades. And so even the modest pay increases that we've seen in recent years have barely filled the bucket. If you compare what a wildland firefighter, a federal firefighter, I should say, makes compared to, say, their CAL FIRE counterparts, who are often on the same fire line, and they're making roughly half of what those folks are making when they start out. And of course, over the progression of their careers, like that adds up. So recently, as far just in the last few years, the Biden administration put like a a cap on that firefighters had to be making at least $15 an hour, which you think about like the kind of work that these folks are performing is just still egregiously low, especially for our firefighters here in California, who of course are facing incredibly high housing costs, who are having to live in the communities that they're protecting.
Is there a plan to recruit or retain the wildland firefighters who are still there?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a few plans that have been circulating in Congress. One of them is the Wildland Firefighter Pay Protection Act. So this is something that would really just codify some of the pay raises that were temporary. The Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law brought through enough budget to secure those $15 an hour minimums. They also boosted the salaries of firefighters by either 50% or $20,000, whichever was lower. But those things were temporary. And ultimately, as we know, in the way that funding goes, anything that's temporary is going to be on the table. And so organizers and firefighters have been really trying to make sure that that's written into law, to make sure that those pay raises are something that they can count on year after year. And that just hasn't come to pass. I mean, we've seen this issue get kicked down the road again and again. Over the last several years, this bill has been introduced several times. So the current status of that is that it's been tied to appropriations, which, as we know, has been incredibly difficult for this divided Congress to pass, to agree on. So we're at a place now where, again, we've postponed until December, where Congress will again try to get this budget passed. And we'll find out then if they're able to secure those pay raises.
That was my conversation with Gabrielle Cannon, a reporter for The Guardian. And that does it for today's show. Thank you for listening. We'd love to hear from you. If you have a story idea or feedback, you can email us at podcast@kvpr.org. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.